Every single crack in the Arctic ice is a heartbeat for global trade. It's pulsing faster, faster than we ever imagined.
This is it, a silent, unstoppable shift. A shift that will redefine every single border on the entire map.
The North is melting, but the heat is coming for you. It's the ultimate gamble, where every saved mile costs a literal fortune in risk.
Imagine this. It's a Tuesday morning. You're half asleep, reaching for your phone, and you see it. That little notification. Your order has been delivered. Your new phone, your headphones, the birthday gift you ordered at the last minute. You smile. You don't think about how it got there. Now imagine, that same morning, someone on the other side of the world is also waking up, but they're not checking a delivery. They're watching floodwaters pour through their front door. A heat wave has cracked the ground outside their home. The river that fed their crops for generations ran dry last summer, and this summer, it flooded. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Those two moments, your delivery notification and their flood, are connected. Connected by a route, a melting road, a shortcut being carved through the top of the planet right now as you watch this video. And when I show you what's actually happening up there, I promise you're going to look at your next delivery notification very differently.
First, let me show you why this shortcut matters so much right now in your life. Think of global trade like the blood in your body. Blood carries the oxygen that keeps you alive. Global shipping carries the products that keep modern life running. And just like blood, it all flows through specific pathways. Arteries. And the most important artery in the world runs through Egypt, the Suez Canal. Nearly 12% of all global maritime trade passes through it. Almost a third of all container shipping between Asia and Europe travels through that one narrow strip of water. It's where your phone came from, your television, your kids' toys, your medication. Then everything changed. In 2023, rebels in Yemen started attacking ships using that route. Since then, attacks in the Red Sea forced the world's biggest shipping companies to reroute their fleets around the southern tip of Africa, adding weeks to every journey and millions of dollars in cost. And the result? Container traffic through the Suez Canal dropped by 75% in 2024 compared to the year before. 75%. And those historically low levels persisted well into 2025. That collapse is why, in the middle of all this chaos, the world's most powerful nations started looking north, way north, to the very top of the world. And what they found there, or rather, what they found was melting there, changes everything. Look at a globe. Not a flat map, a globe. Put your finger on Shanghai, China. Now put your other finger on Rotterdam, the Netherlands. The standard shipping route goes south, across the Indian Ocean, through the Suez Canal, up through the Mediterranean. That journey covers about 20,000 kilometers and takes around 40 days. Now trace a line over the top of the world, across the Arctic. That's the Northern Sea route. It hugs Russia's coastline, runs along the top of Siberia, through the Bering Strait. And suddenly, everything changes. That Arctic route is nearly 7,000 kilometers shorter, nearly 40% less distance, cutting transit times almost in half, 20 days instead of 40. Let that sink in. The same journey cut in half. Like discovering your 40-minute commute has a 20-minute shortcut that only opened last year. And this is the key thing. That shortcut exists because the ice is melting. The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. Ice that has existed for thousands of years is disappearing. The oldest, thickest Arctic sea ice, ice that has survived for more than 4 years, has declined by over 95% since the 1980s. 95%. Gone. In March 2025, Arctic winter sea ice reached the lowest annual maximum extent in the entire 47-year satellite record. So this road isn't being built. It's being unlocked by warming temperatures. And the countries who realized this first are now racing to control it. In October 2025, a container ship called the Istanbul Bridge sailed from China to Europe through the Arctic in just 20 days. The fastest China to Europe container voyage ever recorded through this route. And the company behind it didn't stop there. They announced plans for regular weekly services, eventually aiming for year-round Arctic navigation between China and Europe. This is no longer an experiment. This is a new road, and the fight over who controls it has already begun. Here's something you might not know. You can't just sail the Arctic. Even with less ice, it's still one of the most brutal environments on Earth. Ice can appear without warning. There's almost no rescue infrastructure. And if your ship gets into trouble, help could be days away. To navigate it safely, you need something very specific: a nuclear-powered icebreaker. Think of it like a giant bulldozer for the ocean. A machine designed to smash through meters of ice and carve a path where none exists. And this is where things get interesting and a little uncomfortable. Russia is the only country on Earth that has them. Right now, it operates a fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers and plans to expand that fleet even further. No other country comes close. Russia is the only one holding the key to this road. If you want to pass through the Arctic, you go through them. That's not just geography, that's control. Russia has already gone a step further. It officially defines the Northern Sea Route as its own national transport corridor. Not an international highway. Its highway. Open to others, but only on its terms. And while this is happening, China is moving in. In 2018, China declared itself a near-Arctic state, even though its closest Arctic coastline is more than 1,500 kilometers away. Because for China, this isn't about geography. It's about access, influence, and the future of global trade. In October 2025, Russia and China signed a major agreement to jointly develop this Arctic passage, a partnership that turns a melting shortcut into a strategic corridor. Meanwhile, the United States and NATO are watching all of this very closely, and they're not comfortable. NATO has already begun expanding its Arctic presence. More exercises, more coordination, more positioning. Because what's happening here isn't just trade, it's power shifting. We used to talk about the Iron Curtain, a line that divided Europe during the Cold War. Now, a new line is forming, not across land, but across ice. An Arctic curtain. A boundary where influence, control, and conflict are beginning to collide. And right in the middle of all this, there are people who were never asked. People who have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years, whose lives depend on the land, the ice, and the balance that's now changing. His name is Andre. He's Sami. His people have lived in the Arctic for generations, herding reindeer, fishing, surviving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. And in 2025, he said something simple, but devastating. Without fish, there is no trade. Without pastures, there are no reindeer. And without reindeer, there are no Sami people. Around 4 million people live inside the Arctic Circle. They didn't get a vote on this new road. They weren't part of the negotiations. They don't control the ships. But they will live with the consequences. Because for them, this isn't strategy. This isn't trade. This is survival. Now here is the part of this story I really need you to understand. Because this is where it stops being about trade routes and geopolitics and starts being about you. Every ship that sails through the Arctic burns fuel, and that fuel produces something called black carbon. You might know it as soot, the dark particles that come out of a diesel engine's exhaust. On its own, it doesn't sound like much, but when it reaches the Arctic, it changes everything. Because white ice reflects sunlight back into space, like a mirror. But when black carbon settles on that ice, it darkens the surface, and that changes how it behaves. Instead of reflecting heat, it absorbs it, and that heat accelerates melting at a scale that is almost hard to comprehend. Per unit of mass, black carbon can have a warming impact up to 1,500 times greater than carbon dioxide when it lands on snow and ice. 1,500 times. Now watch what happens next. The ice begins to melt. As it melts, it exposes darker ocean water underneath, and that water absorbs even more heat. More heat leads to more melting. More melting opens more water. More open water allows more ships. More ships release more soot. And the cycle continues. It feeds itself, a system that reinforces its own acceleration. A loop with no off switch. And it's already happening. Between 2013 and 2024, the number of ships entering Arctic waters increased by 37%. But the total distance those ships traveled within the Arctic more than doubled. 108%. More ships, staying longer, going further, and adding more of the very thing that's melting the road they depend on.
And here is where it becomes even more complicated. Because in February 2026, countries proposed new rules. Rules that would require ships to use cleaner fuels in the Arctic. Rules designed to slow this process down. But those rules were blocked, led by some of the very countries most invested in using this route, which means the system continues unchecked. But black carbon is only part of the story, because beneath the Arctic, there is something much bigger, something that has been locked away for thousands of years. Under the seafloor, in frozen sediment, there are vast amounts of methane, a powerful greenhouse gas stored inside a layer called permafrost. And that layer is starting to thaw. Permafrost contains roughly twice as much carbon as the entire atmosphere, and as it warms, it begins to release that carbon back into the system. Methane levels in these regions have already been rising, and scientists are watching closely, because this process cannot be reversed, only slowed. Now, to be clear, this is not a sudden explosion. It's not a catastrophic release all at once. It's something quieter, more gradual, but far more dangerous in a different way, because it doesn't stop. Let me bring this right to your front door. The World Meteorological Organization confirmed that 2025 was one of the 3 warmest years ever recorded, and that the past 11 years are the 11 warmest in recorded history. That doesn't happen by coincidence. It's a pattern, and that pattern is accelerating. The same report describes extreme weather events in 2025 as devastating. Floods, heat waves, wildfires. Events that didn't just happen in isolation, but triggered cascading impacts on lives, livelihoods, and entire food systems. The floods that destroyed homes. The heat waves that collapsed harvests. The droughts that emptied reservoirs. These are not random events, they are connected. Right now, around 900 million people, nearly 11% of the world's population, live on low-lying coastal areas at direct risk from rising sea levels. And those sea levels are rising faster than before. In the 1990s, they rose at about 2.1 millimeters per year. Today, that number is closer to 4.1 millimeters per year. Nearly double. And that's just the average. In many cities, the rise is much higher. Places like Mumbai, Jakarta, and Miami are already experiencing the impact. Because every additional millimeter raises the baseline. It increases the damage from storms. It lowers the threshold between inconvenience and catastrophe. In Alaska, entire villages are already being forced to relocate. Communities that have existed for generations, displaced by coastal erosion and repeated storm damage. And this is where everything connects. The Arctic is the planet's air conditioner. Its ice reflects heat back into space. But since the 1980s, Arctic summer sea ice has shrunk by about 50%. Half of the system, gone. And now we are opening a new highway straight through what remains. That delivery notification on your phone, the product inside it, traveled through one of these global routes. Suez, Malacca, or soon, the Arctic. And as shipping becomes faster and cheaper, More ships make that journey. More ships mean more soot. More soot means more melting. More melting means more extreme weather. And that weather doesn't stay in the Arctic. It reaches your city, your food, your water, your life. It is one loop, and all of us are inside it. Now here's the part we don't talk about enough. This isn't just about greed. The Suez Canal is under pressure. The Panama Canal has already been disrupted by drought, and global trade routes are becoming more unstable. The world isn't looking north because it's clever. It's turning north because everything south of it is breaking. Let me take you back to where it all started. John Franklin. 129 men, 2 ships, 1845. They set out to find a passage through the Arctic. They never made it back. Their ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, were eventually found on the Arctic seabed, remarkably well preserved, locked in ice for over 170 years. The ice kept everything, every mustard pot, every uniform button, every logbook, frozen in time, perfectly intact. Now that same ice is retreating. Cruise ships carrying over 1,000 passengers are sailing through the Northwest Passage on luxury voyages. Container ships are racing through the Northern Sea Route, carrying 20,000 pairs of sneakers. The same waters that once trapped explorers are now becoming highways. And scientists are watching this very closely. In January 2026, the director of the Copernicus Climate Change Service said this: "The world is rapidly approaching the long-term temperature limit set by the Paris Agreement. We are bound to pass it. The choice now is how we manage what comes next." Franklin's ships are still down there, frozen, silent, in the dark. They are not just a piece of history. They are not a memorial. They are a warning.